Good morning.
Is Wayne
Wayne's on. Yeah,
you coming
Wayne's
on
here.
video, Wayne?
I will right now.
There
How's
you
that?
are.
There you
Good.
go. Good. And I have reviewed Dan's proposed response there
Okay.
that came in last night.
Okay. Who wants to start this? I think Attorney DeLisi might be in, since you've been communicating, it might be best for you to restate your position and then we can respond to it.
Great, I appreciate it. I just want to confirm that you all can hear me.
Yes.
I can.
Okay, and I'm just wondering, because I always like to know, can you actually see me or is it just voice?
Just voice.
Okay. All right, great. Well, I figured what I would do, everybody, I think, has seen the correspondence and so forth. I would just like to recap very briefly is since the last hearing, or shortly before the last hearing, we were provided with a copy of a draft agreement that I think was drafted by Attorney Hoffman. And in our review of that document, one of the things that jumped out at us initially as a threshold issue was the total amount of daily flow calculation that is set out in that document, which was set out to be 21,254 gallons per day. We requested an explanation or a breakout as to that number, because that number allows us to do a calculation as to the cost of the sewer should the commissioners grant a request and approve sewer flow to the property. That explanation came in a document through your counsel, Attorney Hoffman, to me, dated June 4th, which kind of set out a what I think is probably something that was maybe prepared by Dan and endorsed by the board, going through flow calculations for 380, 390, and 400. And I then reviewed your commercial connection policy and the regulations as well, and collaborated with Mr. Stasko and Attorney Nyland, and sent you two separate pieces of correspondence, one dated June 10th and one dated June 15th, which basically kind of highlights some of the issues that we saw with respect to the flow values that were attributed to each property in your memo, and then outlined a potential scenario whereby we would try to kind of envision how this would happen and how it would be paid. Normally, as you know, when applicants come before the sewer commissioners, there's usually a sewer line in the road, and once they pay the connection fee and it gets approved, they have the ability to connect. In this particular circumstance, that's not the case. And so we're trying to get an understanding, and it's really a threshold issue for us, as to who, how the cost would be allocated. And since Mr. Stasko would be, it'd probably be cheaper for him to do it than the town, but since he's offering to pay for the extension from the sewer pump facility on Tapello Road to the property, we were trying to figure out that we think that probably the best way to do this would be to deduct the cost of doing that, especially being that it's going to be a public line and the town is going to own it after it's installed, from the deduct that cost from the cost to be paid to the town for the connection and privilege. I'm not sure, I'm sure you will have a response to that, and that's what we were hoping, is to have a dialogue as to how this is all going to work. So that's kind of the backdrop. Now, just generally speaking, and I know you've seen my correspondence, and sounds like Dan has already provided you some kind of response to that last night. But you know, what I see, at least in the regulations or in the policy, is that the flow determination for the EDUs is to be calculated based upon Title V values for intended uses. It doesn't say anything about historical uses, doesn't say anything about actual water flows, and it doesn't say anything about potential uses. And so what my goal was with respect to this call, our goal as a team, is to kind of, I guess, twofold. Number one, confirm that the maximum daily sewer flow number for the calculation of the EDUs would be based upon Title V values for current intended uses, and also to understand from the board as to whether the proposal concerning the allocation of costs that I just outlined would be generally acceptable. Obviously, it would need to be tweaked. And so just stepping back briefly in summarizing with respect to each of the three properties, we have 380, 390, and 400. I'll start with 390. The septic system that was approved was designed, it was intentionally oversized in the event that it might become necessary in the future to accept any flow from 380, which at the time was not, which is a very old system. And so we have that for 390. On 400, apparently that system was constructed prior to the 97 gallons per day per 1,000 square foot requirement that's presently in existence. And it was, Stop and Shop has basically told us that that was, that number was, the 7,000 gallons per day design calculation was arrived at by picking a theoretical concept of a conservative value of the amount of water they think they might go through and doubling it. So that's 400. As far as 380 is concerned, it looked like your calculations included historical uses and potential future uses that might never come to fruition, such as apartments on the second floor. It appears to me that your regulations would require any applicant or any property owner to come back before the commission to get approval to the extent that any of the flow calculations change in any material way. And so there's kind of a mechanism already in place to take into account that in the future. So with that as a backdrop, and in summary, what we're really hoping to do here through this call today is to confirm how we can arrive at that number, that it's based on existing Title V requirements for current intended uses, and also to gauge the board's reaction to our proposal with respect to the concept of allocating costs for the build out of the extension. That's our summary for today. Have I missed anything, Chip or Donald?
No, this Chip, I don't think you have. I think the the overriding theme is that we're trying to find a formula that's fair to both the owner as well as to the commission.
Okay.
Shall I? Bill, shall I?
Yeah, no, fire away. Fire away. I mean, I think it's probably good that the board, gives our sort of individual thoughts, and then, fire away.
Wayne, you're still muted, by the way.
Who is me?
Wayne is.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I'm not now. I'm sorry. Go
Okay.
ahead, John.
I have, this is my personal opinion at this point, subject to being swayed by my fellow commissioners and perhaps others. But I think all of us have spent a lot of time looking at all the details, and I've kind of summarized my intent and desire for today's meeting as follows. I think we need to seek commission agreement on two fundamental issues. And if we're able to do that, then we'll be able to go forward with the service agreement and any changes that might result therein from our previous version. Item number one is clearly the design flow that needs to be assumed for the Chief Justice Cushing properties to be used in calculating the connection privilege fee. Item number two is the private connection from the Veterans Pump Station to the CJC properties, and any potential future connections and possible future credits for the owner of the CJC properties should there be any future connections made to that pipe. Going to the design flow point. Clearly, that's a very important element in the consideration for both the sewer commission and for the owner, and whatever calculations or considerations he may go through before we move forward, if we do. It's a complicated issue, and there are a lot of ways to approach it given the variability in the responses that the potential applicant has made and that Attorney DeLisi just went over. I think the effort that was requested of our consulting engineer, Dan Coughlin, and which we all received last evening, and which certainly I spent a lot of time last night and again this morning, and I don't think I lost any sleep, but it was, it's a complete document that looks at all the potential evaluation methodologies and comes to a bottom line conclusion, and without going into any of those details, which I agree with, and that bottom line number is 21,720 gallons per day to be used as the design flow in the connection privilege calculation. The second issue, the private connection pipe, seems straightforward, and it certainly is. There's no reason the commission would be considering that pipe were it not for this particular private property. And therefore, the owner of the private property should pay all the initial costs thereof, with the possible exception of any valves and stubs that might be included for potential connections by other people. However improbable those connections may be, it would be prudent for the sewer commission to include those stubs, and that's subject to the future evaluations by our consulting engineer, and provide an appropriate deduction from the final connection privilege fee the owner would be requested to pay. So that would be one potential deduct in that private connection pipe at the convenience of the sewer commission for some potential future connection. Further, should a future connection be made, there would be a connection privilege fee associated with that. And I think it would be appropriate for the commission to consider at least some fraction of that potential, albeit unlikely, connection privilege fee being provided as a further credit to the owner of the CJC properties. That's my initial input.
Wayne, do you want to go next?
Sure. I had a chance this morning to review Dan's proposed response to the questions that Attorney DeLisi asked this morning, including some information that you haven't asked yet, or you might have asked in the past, and so on in the future. For instance, how would a payment be made? And he proposed let's just, I don't have it in front of me, but let's say 10% as a down payment, when certain aspects are done, another payment, and then before the final building is ready or whatever, and everything's connected, the balance of that, which would be the majority, would be the majority of what the fee would be, so that would give the applicant the opportunity to delay that until he's getting revenue and stuff, obviously, to pay for it. I think that today, because the document came last night, and it is about 4 or 5, 6 pages long, and it has some graphs and charts and things, that it will answer that, and I just don't know whether today we can say the draft can be given to you the way it is, or given to you as a draft the way it is, or whatever, so that you'll have a chance to use this information before you have to come before us at another meeting for us to be able to approve the draft to send to you, to maybe save a week or two off of your time frame. So after Bill has a chance to talk, I think that it might be appropriate to have Dan just go over the highlights of what we've come up with, rather than all of the background and stuff like that, so that you can get an idea if there's something that you would like to have discussed at another meeting or something. It could be accelerated, and put that in right now, and get some answers for that. I did concur with, it was the restaurant, I believe, that had the higher flow. That Stop and Shop has a 4,000 flow, not the 7,000 flow, and the new building is looking at about a 7,000 gallon per day flow because of the design of the septic system. It was done to handle any extras, but because it was designed because the calculations you have design it as all basically retail space, not 2 restaurants, or not other things that may use more water, that the amount that should be set aside for it should be greater than what the improbable leasing of the space is, which would be all retail, meaning the smallest part of retail. So those are my comments, and Bill, you can go on from there.
Yeah. So like John and Wayne, I too have looked at this last night and gone through all of it just to sort of prime myself for discussion. And I'm going to go back to, I think, the last time we met live. And I think the gentleman from Vertex had talked about historical data to be used as a calculation for, for the flow rates and what have you. And I think the board at that time, we didn't take a vote on it, but there was a pretty much a negative response to that. With respect to the latest information that came from Coughlin Engineering, or Coughlin Environmental, excuse me, on the 7th, yesterday. I'm in favor of following that advice, and the reason I do is haven't been on the board for, I guess, the better part of 9 years. We have trusted Dan's counsel for the development of costs on both residential and commercial properties. And I think that there's no reason for us not to continue to do so, number one. I think number two, we set, if we go off of this and we decide to take another firm's advice, I think it sets a very dangerous precedent for the board and the town as far as another potential development, another large residential unit, whatever the application is. It takes it out of our hands at how we as a board and our responsibility as a board to set and to administer rates for the use of the sewer line in this case. So I'm going to stay with the Title V. I am open on two pieces with regards to the actual pipe going down 3A, and I am open to discussing credits as they surface, should somebody want to connect to it. I don't know. I can't answer you right now how that would be monetized or manifest itself physically, how we would do it. But I would be in favor of talking about that kind of thing and doing a deduction on it. As far as the payment itself to the town of Cohasset, I think 2 or 3 meetings ago, or 2 or 3 Zooms ago, I had proposed a third, just to keep it simple. But you know, the actual numbers can be negotiated. But I would be in favor of some progress payment, you know, a deposit with progress payments that are tied to whatever the construction milestones may be. So that's where I come. So Dan, you know, following Wayne's, do you want to just give us highlights? You know, give us a few minutes and go through your calculations that were sent yesterday.
Sure. You know, Attorney DeLisi has referenced the commercial connection regarding it stipulating Title V, but it's also key language in there that says, and as may otherwise be approved by the Cohasset Sewer Commission. And, you know, it's not that we want to use one versus the other. We're just trying to get the most accurate depiction of what future flows will be. And, you know, there are guidelines for establishing those flows, and the ones that would be applicable to this site, because the flows are greater than 10,000 gallons per day, would be those associated with the groundwater discharge permit if they were trying to do an on-site system. And certainly there are several methods that are clearly defined in those regulations. One of them is, of course, Title V. Another one is basically flow meter use. And we've had some discussions regarding what the flow for the facilities were. So I did take a look at that. I know Attorney DeLisi was looking at a 5-year period. What I did in my analysis, I went back a little bit further. A lot of times with these properties, there are long-term multi-year leases involved. So it's tough to really get a flavor of how the diversity of uses at the facility is over a short period. So I went back 10 years and I looked at some of the data. And basically that's what I based our new calculations on, is some of that data. And what it showed basically was, well, first let me go through what DEP guidance would be. Typically, DEP guidance is basically to, if you're using water consumption data, for instance, is to look at the peak flow period and then take the average during that peak flow period and multiply it by 2 or 200, or take, you know, have a 200% increase. So in looking at that, I mean, there are several peak flow periods in that 10-year period. And they are very significant. If I were using just the average for those peak flow periods, in other words, that single quarter, the flows would be very significantly higher, you know, in the order of 11 to 12,000 gallons per building. I believe Mr. Stasko had detailed previously that some of those data may be influenced by outdoor water uses. We never received anything that would quantify that flow. Relative to that, but I did look at it from the perspective of potentially that was an influence. You know, so I did look at some winter periods, and obviously the flows were lower during the winter periods. But you know, just discounting the summer periods entirely, I think is not prudent, because you do have increased uses in the summer period. Just because of population and changes in the community, as well as different uses at the facilities. So what I did is I looked at a 1 year period. I picked the highest or max 1 year period, used that average, and then multiplied that by 2, or taking 200%. And I feel that was pretty consistent with the DEP guidelines. And that resulted in flow calculations. So with 380, it was 8,689 gallons per day. And for 400, it was 7,701 gallons per day. And obviously those are significant, and they seem more consistent with some of the original design numbers, or some of the previous design numbers. And simply that was basically taking an annual average, multiplying it by 200%. And those are the values we ended up calculating to calculate the max or design flow. And that followed pretty much the DEP guidance. And in terms of what the Sewer Commission is trying to do is we're trying to capture what the peak flow or max flow would be for the properties. And that's what we do for every other property in town. Typically for new properties, primarily residential in Cohasset, we're using Title V, and that represents a max day flow for those properties. And we're just trying to do the same thing for this as well. There's different methods of using, and what we're trying to do is use the best method. Our original calculations that I think you had a chance to review, looked at it from a perspective of different uses. In this more recent calculation, we did go back and we looked at the historical flows and basically found values that indicated we should be using comparable values. So that's pretty much what we ended up doing for our analysis. I did make some additional comments within this. DEP guidance also indicates that flow designation should be a not to exceed number when they're doing their permits. And I thought, based upon the flows that we have here, that's kind of what we're looking at. We're trying to look at the maximum conditions so that we can evaluate flows downstream, evaluate pipe capacity, evaluate pump station capacity. I think the numbers that we ended up deriving would give you that kind of not to exceed value. There are certain concerns, obviously. Obviously the presentations by Vertex and Attorney DeLisi indicated much lower numbers. And there's a question as to how uses change in the future and what impacts those will have. And certainly there are two perspectives you can look at this from. You can look at it as establishing a max flow base, not to exceed, something that's conservative, that represents the facilities, typically the way we do it for most facilities in town. Or you can look at it from the perspective of looking at it just as this window of time and saying this is what it is right now, and any changes to that, you need to come back. So there are two perspectives that the board can evaluate to try to look at that. There may be a medium point someplace, I'm not sure, but you can't look at that from that perspective. But the one thing I caution is a lot of times, management and properties don't always come back when a new lease is cut. So if you're looking for a low number and looking for them to come back with any modified or expanded uses all the time, when a lease changes, I'd make sure that's written in the agreement, the service agreement. And obviously there should be penalties associated with that too in the service agreement that basically make sure that any flow changes are responded back to the board, and the board has an opportunity to evaluate those, to see what the impacts are, and potentially assign new fees. So that's the way I approached our more recent evaluation. I did look at some of the other numbers or items that were presented in the last submission by DeLisi. There was a cost estimate. I thought the cost estimate was fairly high. One thing that was interesting is there was a pump station involved with that. Obviously, that pump station would be a private pumping station for the development. I don't believe those flows would be included in any numbers or evaluation. It also looked like some of the numbers were very conservative, but I understand that because there aren't any plans available at this point in time to really do a good takeoff. One item that was put in there as a unit price was the flowable fill. I think you're definitely going to be using flowable fill in the EPA, but the value was very high relative to the proposal that was presented. And in theory, it could present almost $250,000 of additional cost if not accounted for and properly priced. Overall, I felt that the cost estimate was relatively high. It included portions of private connections that really shouldn't even be involved in the evaluation of any type of common 3A pipeline. I did mention, in my opinion, it is going to be fairly rare if a new connection along that route ties in. But I did recommend that if connection stubs were placed and extended off of the right-of-way, that there should probably be some compensation to the builder or developer for those types of connections. Otherwise, it's up to the board what they pick or choose in terms of, a final agreement or negotiation. I did have some general recommendations for applying the fee on a stage base. 10% at time of application, 30% at commencement of construction, and then 60% prior to activation. I felt those were fairly appropriate given commercial construction and cash flow aspects. I also mentioned that we will probably have some system impacts along the route, some upgrade measures that we'll have to do for this flow. Obviously the connection fee would be pay for those. The only other concern I had is something that needs to be incorporated into the agreement is the maintenance of the on-site tanks and on-site facilities. I felt that was a big concern, especially where there's a high potential for grease production. We don't want that in the system. We want that segregated out, and there should be some mechanism for keeping track of that, reporting that to the commission, and making sure the systems are properly maintained. That's pretty much our evaluation at this point in time. We presented the different options. We did look at it from the perspective of what this site would be applicable to, which is basically the groundwater discharge regulations and how the DEP guidance addresses flows. And I feel that that's an appropriate mechanism for estimating flows at this facility.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Attorney DeLisi, do you have any, actually, no, Rod, do you have any comments to this? Do you want to add on behalf of the town of Cohasset?
I don't at this point, but thanks.
Okay. And Attorney DeLisi, do you have any comments?
Well, I'm trying to digest. That's a lot of information. I appreciate Dan explaining it. And when the letter is able to be released and ready to be released, we certainly would appreciate seeing that. Where I start this conversation is by, as a lawyer, is by looking at what the language of your policy says. And as I read the pertinent sentence in your document, it says the number of EDUs assigned to a commercial property shall be based on the calculated wastewater flow using Mass Title V flow generation values based upon intended uses. And then it goes on to say, and as may otherwise be approved by the Cohasset Sewer Commission. When you look at that language, the sentence breaks it down between how to assign a value to an EDU, which is Title V, on the one hand, and then the number of EDUs as assigned maybe as otherwise approved by the Cohasset Sewer Commission. I think that that's a very important distinction, because the language doesn't say that you could vary the flow generation values that you're going to base the number on. The language actually says that you must use those values. It says shall. And then the remainder of the sentence talks about the EDUs assigned. The number of EDUs may otherwise be approved by the Cohasset Sewer Commission. You've already approved the EDUs, which is 1 EDU per 440 gallons per day with a connection fee of $37,500. That's what you've assigned to the flow and the cost of it all. So I guess I'm expressing a bit of a frustration that I disagree. I'd like to know what Rod's opinion is, but I disagree a bit with Dan's interpretation that catch-all provision allows you to go outside of the flow generation values from Title V. Those figures take into account, peaks and valleys and spikes and so forth, that they're conservative values in and of themselves. And so to increase them in a sense, in an arbitrary manner, and I understand what Dan explained very well why he's seeking to do that, or why it makes, what the commission's concern is as it looks at all of this. So I understand that, the reasoning behind it. I just don't think that your policy allows you to go outside of the Title V flows, and obviously the delta is quite a delta. It's quite a difference. So that's kind of my initial reaction to what you're saying. As far as the extension, I think what I'm hearing from you is you're saying that the commission rejects the concept of reimbursing Mr. Stasko the cost of building the extension, or taking it off of the privilege fee, rather. You reject that concept and instead prefer to have a discussion about some kind of reimbursement to the extent that any other property owner along the line hooks in. My understanding is there's probably only about maybe 2 or 3 properties that might have the ability to extend to actually tap into this on the west side of on the east side of Route 3A. So the concept of a reimbursement is something that might never happen. In fact, probably won't happen. And so we're just trying, as Chip said, to figure out, is there a way to look at this, that's fair? And I expected the commission to have to be concerned that offsetting the cost of constructing the line against the fee might result in a very small fee paid to the town. And my thought with that was we need to be open to discussing some kind of cap on the cost, so that the commission very clearly could realize a certain minimum dollar sum from this. But those are my initial thoughts. I don't know, Chip, if you want to jump in, or Donald.
No, I don't think anybody's challenging Dan's calculation, and I think that we really need to see that letter to figure out exactly how we got get to those numbers. I mean, we're talking about a fairly significant delta, I think, between our Title V numbers and theirs. I don't think that we're concerned about there being a precedent. I think that, you know, the way that I look at these things is when you have infrastructure that needs to be connected and there's a value to the community in terms of having a sewer line and taking that relief and not injecting that material into the ground, there are ways that you work out between the private and the public, a cooperative venture. It happens in all the time with district improvement financing, tax financing, property abatements. And I think that we're hoping that we would find a way that we could establish and create this line, have a tie-in, a value to the community, but it to be fair, that there's no windfall for the commission by us, you know, connecting, and but by the same token that there's no, you know, great benefit to Donald that we pay our fair share to connect and to build this line and ultimately improve the environment in that section of the community. So I'm hoping we can see this letter and share it with Vertex. So we can, I agree with the commission that we need to get an agreement on the flows so that we can make a decision how we're going to go forward. We don't want to be in a position where we have to reject this out of hand because it's cost prohibitive. Then I think if that happens, I think we've lost the opportunity to do this the right way. I hope that we don't get to that. But I think, Jeff, we just need to take a look at this letter, be able to respond, and to keep the communication lines open between the commission and the owner.
I think just for a comment that I had that I never had answered, but maybe with Rod on the phone too, is where the sewer commission is allowing a private pipe to go down 3A to connect onto our municipal system because of the fact that we want to protect the water supply, and we're able to do that through our bylaw because it's more of an emergency than it is something that is, you know, just something to do, in that this pipe between Tupelo Road and the Stop and Shop is in an area that has not been designated for sewer, meaning, and the town has to go ahead technically, if we were to use any other connection on the pipe, except for the proposed Stop and Shop, et cetera, that parcel, that we would need to have town meeting approval to expand the sewer district to include the Stop and Shop property. And so I'm not sure that someone at any of the properties, Peter Capizzoli's property, would have the ability to be able to tie into this, because unless they had an emergency and, you know, their cesspool or leaching field or whatever is overflowing and there wasn't any other options in putting a system there, because obviously it's the same watershed as the Stop and Shop property. But so, and I think the pipe size that's going in will provide a little bit of flow, but it isn't going to provide any extensive flow. For instance, on the former Tire property there, McNulty's property now, that I think is for sale, you wouldn't be able to put 100 units of housing there because the pipe wouldn't even carry it, and I'm not sure that the people of the town would allow you to do it. Because it is a private connection to that one property. So I think, and these are just other questions that I'm not sure are answered yet, but we're not asking the applicant to put in a larger pipe than is necessary in order to take additional flow. It's going to really be putting in a pipe that will handle the flow that they're designating with the reserve that's there, but it isn't going to do 3 times the amount or anything else like that. So that's just an additional comment from me.
So, Wayne, if I might jump in, you refer to it as a private line. And I guess, fundamentally, I come back to this issue because the document that you guys provided me with, the sewer connection agreement draft, contemplates the transfer of ownership of the main over to the town. And so from my standpoint, I'm looking at this and saying it's contemplated to be a public line. And I just want to clarify that, make sure that that perhaps you've misspoken and just indicated that, kind of similar to I think what Bill might have previously indicated, which is that the line wouldn't be put in but for the request of this particular property owner because of his ability to provide the public amenity that of affordable housing. I just want to make sure that we're on the same page with that one.
Maybe I can just interject. The agreement does call for that. I think the reason was that you're going to have to gain a utility access to Route 3A. And that's not always easy for a private entity. It's not impossible, but it's not easy. And typically, Mass DOT wants to make sure that there is a reliable entity behind that will operate and maintain that system and respond to breaks. And in terms of the commission, we see that being a potential environmental issue because this is so close to Peppermint Brook and the watershed. So I think from the commission's perspective, based upon some of the feedback I received, they're willing to accept the ownership, and in that they are accepting a certain amount of liability, a certain amount of obligation, long-term obligation to operate and maintain that pipe, and that has a cost, that has a value. And basically, they're willing to absorb that just to make sure that that pipeline is properly maintained and there's a team in immediate response in case there is a break. That has a nominal value to assume that liability. And I think that's what the commission is seeing, that they're already assuming from as part of this connection. But it was a private connection. There's no one else anticipated on this line. It's not part of an planned expansion. And from that perspective, it could remain private. It's just, the general opinion was that it's probably safer for the public and the environment if the town assumes responsibility for it ultimately.
Can I make this, hello?
We can hear you, Don.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. TerraTech, who did the design or gave a proposal for the design there came to 32,000 gallons per day. So that would accept, if needed, any of the abutters on the property. Did everyone get a chance to read TerraTech's proposal?
I'm not.
I don't know if
sure.
I did. I don't know if I did.
That was given to the board, I think, approximately 2.5 weeks ago.
Which?
And they used the town criteria for their proposal. And they talked to some of the town engineers prior to writing this proposal for engineering.
That would have been attached to the June 10th letter.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I have some recollection to some of it, but it was what I was reading was an estimate of what was going to happen and what it was going to cost. Is that what
Okay.
we're dealing with? But
There was a estimate of construction,
right,
and then there was estimate of engineering cost to
Right.
engineer the pipe. TerraTech was the company, the engineering company said, this is what it would cost. You would have to pay for us to engineer the pipe according to the town standards.
right. And it was $70,000 or something,
It
right?
was $75,000.
So what has that got to do with them saying that other people are going to tie in?
You,
It didn't say anything to that in the letter that I think I read.
well, if you read the first paragraph of the letter dated June 9th, that was sent to you on June 10th.
Okay, read that to us.
The sanitary sewer will be designed to convey approximately 32 gallons per day from the existing
32,000.
proposed building located at the project site, plus additional capacity required by the town of Cohasset.
What additional capacity have we required from you from the town of Cohasset?
They went back over your regulations.
No, to answer the question.
Well, I would think anybody that wanted to tie in, or as you said, if Peter Capizzoli couldn't, has a septic system that's failed. So they looked at all the properties along the route, if they had to tie in.
But I think you're putting things into the letter now that I did read. And if I missed and said it's 32,000 gallons per day, if that it said for that site.
No, you read plus additional capacity as required by the town.
Yes, that's 32,000 gallons plus additional capacity.
That's what
to me, that says you are designing it for 32,000 gallons and you are going to put in more than 32,000 gallons, more than 32,000 gallons capacity.
No, if you go back over their calculations, they calculated what the site was going to produce plus what the town requirements.
I didn't see, you're reading something into it that I did not read into it. And I guess I would have to have all of the attorneys say, what does this mean?
Okay.
So basically, you're saying you're adding roughly 13 to 14,000 gallons based upon town requirements. And the question is, where do you get town requirements from? Because I don't think the board's ever stipulated they needed additional flow in the pipeline.
Correct.
I would have to ask them where they pulled it out of your regulations or the town regulations.
But where did the 32,000 gallons, right, where did it come from? And you're saying that was discussed with all these different people in town? That what, that was an estimate from that company to do all of the engineering for something that we haven't even seen the design of or where it's going to be. And you have a bill, you have an estimate from a contractor that has $500,000 worth of asphalt paving, including full lines going down the highway, has $57,000 for traffic details on Route 3A. Yet the design, the only thing that we have is going down the shoulder of the road, which is not even paved except for the curb cuts going into private property. My point is, where's that come from?
Well, my point is, what's the point in the first place? The owner is going to pay for the pipe.
Right.
Period. I think to make progress, let me, and I do want to make progress. We could have these discussions ad infinitum. I don't think that's in the interest of the Sewer Commission, the town of Cohasset, and certainly not in the interest of the owner of CJC to keep talking about these details. Let me suggest that for discussion purposes, the commission consider incorporating the results contained in Mr. Coughlin's report to us dated June 17 into a revised agreement document, and also to include language associated with potential credits to the owner of CJC for any potential future connections that would potentially offset his total cost. Otherwise, we're just going to be spinning our wheels and talking forever about things that could be talked about forever. So,
John, I'd say well said. The only thing I would add to that would be a potential payment plan.
yes.
But
Sure.
you know, at the end of the day, you know, we're the guys who have to put this together. We're not, you know, as I think it was alluded to, that we are going to be making a profit off of this. Point number one, this was not our idea. Point number two, this was not our idea. We are following the same guidelines that a 2-bedroom home would in the town of Cohasset to develop a cost for this fee. So I think we go with what we have done in the past, following the Title V recommendations of our engineer, and make a proposal to the applicant, and then we can have further discussion on it.
I agree with that.
So I move we incorporate the contents of Dan's latest letter to us in the connection agreement. That's not the right phrase. What do we call it? The what?
Service agreement?
Service agreement. And give the feedback to the CJC ownership and his attorneys, and let them make their evaluation. I mean, I understand they have to do it, but we cannot go on forever talking about the infinite details, or nobody's intentions are going to be satisfied. Let me just point out that the only reason we're here is that we reconsidered a previous denial to connect that property to the town sewer system, and we had good reasons for doing so. We reconsidered that discussion and that decision in light of the fact that we became aware that there was some affordable housing involved in Mr. Stathko's expansion at CJC, and that it was in the town's interest to move forward with that should we decide to do so. We have chosen a path that will avoid the necessity of having town meeting approval for whatever goes on at the CJC site with regard to wastewater disposal, whether it's a connection to the sewer or whether, I guess in the case, if you choose the option of groundwater discharge, you are going to have to get town meeting approval before that would be allowed, I presume. Maybe I can be corrected on that point.
Yeah.
But you have a path that will let you go forward without getting town meeting approval. If you find that attractive, then I think we need to get our ducks in order. You need to make your decision as to how you want to go forward, and let's get this moving. We can't go on forever. I think we have a fair and equitable determination of what the design flow consideration should be. It's a concentrated effort that I think sound. It's in accordance with all the state regulations, and let us revise that service agreement, and then you can make your decision as to whether you want to agree to it and sign it, and we can move forward or not.
Maybe I can also,
Move.
just for due diligence.
Dan, before we do that, John, do you want to make a motion and then we can vote on it?
I move that we incorporate the contents of Dan's latest letter into the service agreement, including a phased payment schedule, and including the language that's appropriate to potential credits for the owner with regard to private connection pipe that they're going to construct.
I second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I what I was saying is, obviously, they haven't seen a recent letter. Obviously, in terms of, just due diligence, if we want to allow them an opportunity, I think they've gotten a good feel for what the board is looking for, how the board feels on certain aspects here. Give them the opportunity to review that one last time and come up with basically a
Well-
final proposal to the board as well.
Well, I think that since we made the vote, I think that we can send them both. We can send them the revised agreement, and then we can send them your information as to how that number was worked up in a comprehensive manner.
And I think that the final document has to be reviewed by both sides, and
Yeah,
if there's going to
absolutely.
be any negotiating and stuff, it would be done with the agreement. I think
Absolutely.
the important thing is that we have to get rid of as many unknowns as we can, and that, like are you going to put more connections on, or you're not going to put more connections? I think the problem with me was that when someone gives you a $1.2 million estimate to build something that I don't think is calculated correctly at all for what it is that they're doing, and wants to deduct it from a $1.6 million payment that they have to pay for something else, it just doesn't make sense. I don't think anybody in the town is going to want to have, this project, have the town pipe put in a special pipe just for them so that they can expand and do more business without them paying for it. Right, David? Is any more comments from the applicant?
Yes. Mr. Coughlin, can you hear me?
Yes.
Could you when you submit, can you give us all your calculations, how you calculated all the data that you collected, you said for past 10 years, the peak flows and everything,
It's in the letter.
and how you arrived at, so I assume you have all the 10 years of water readings from the Cohasset Water Department?
Yes.
Say, yes?
Yes.
Okay. Would you
It's all in
supply all that to us?
It's all in the letter.
Okay.
Is there anything else? Does anyone else have a comment before we close this out?
Thanks, Bill. I have nothing further.
Anyone else?
I move we adjourn.
Second,
And I will say, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
thank you.
All right.
Aye.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.